Good evening. It's been an exciting day. Debate, discussion, keynotes, and some of the best minds in education, media, entertainment, and sports have come together to be able to engage, deliberate with a view to looking at the national education policy and what we can do with it. You are at the FICCI Frames-LEAP. Learn, educate, apply, and progress. That's what LEAP stands for. And we have the desire to leap forward with everything that we do. Our next speaker is somebody who graces your television screen every day. 9 p.m. is your appointed time with him. We've broken the tradition to bring him in at 5:30 today evening. Rare, unique, just for you. Rajdeep Sardesai, an award-winning journalist, author, TV news presenter, one of the brightest minds in our country, one of the brightest minds in the world. Some of Rajdeep's books: How Modi Won India, 2014, the election that changed India. Democracy's 11, the story of Indian cricket. All bestsellers. In fact, the great story of Indian cricket was shortlisted by MCC Lords as Cricket Book of the Year in 2017-2018. Rajdeep has been across the space. He's studied in India at St. Xavier's College, studied at Oxford University, in fact, played first-class cricket at Oxford and captained Mumbai schools. So he's been in sports. He's been on the fringes of entertainment, yes, because everything that happens in the news channels also borders on entertainment these days. But more than anything else, Rajdeep studiously has stayed away from noise television. He has started in television at NDTV, was the founder, editor of IBN 18 Network with CNN IBN, IBN 7, IBN Lokmat. And now he's the consulting editor of India Today Television at the India Today Group. And whilst he leads the #1 English channel for news, for content, and for deliberation and ideas and discussion, Rajdeep is also very close to the education system. His mother has been one of the prime educators at St. Xavier's College and one of the most formidable sociologists and understanding of sociology across our country. She also was my teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome Rajdeep Sardesai for a keynote on the evolving role and the evolving business of digital journalism in India and the roles and digital evolution that's taking place. Rajdeep, over to you.
I think he has locked down.
We've lost Rajdeep in this time, but whilst you wait for Rajdeep, I must tell you, we've had some really exciting discussions through the day. We've had Mr. Amit Khare, the Secretary of INB and Secretary of Education. Literally, he's at the intersection of media and entertainment and sports and everything to do with education. He's driving the national education policy on behalf of the government. We've also had Mr. Subbarao earlier. Mr. Subbarao was the Secretary for HRD and has worked on the documents, the deliberation, the discussions that has led to the national education policy. So he's worked along with Mr. Kasturi Rangan and the entire team. We've had with us Mr. Atul Tiwari, Additional Secretary, INB, Ms. Kalyani, the Joint Secretary, INB. We've also had with us Mr. Subhash Ghai, filmmaker, chairman of Whistling Woods, and an educationist who has taught skills to industry whilst they worked with him over his 40 films. He's also been the educationist who set up the Whistling Woods International School. And that school has been pioneering education in cinema, advertising, television, and it's become one of the biggest and most foremost schools for television in Asia. So Subhashji, he was followed later by Professor Ujjwal Rao Chaudhary from Admas University, who brought together Ramesh Sippiji, the famous director, who runs the Ramesh Sippy Academy for Cinema and Entertainment, RSACE. He brought together Meghna Gaipuri, who actually champions Whistling Woods on a day-to-day basis. Sushma Gaikwad from Whiscraft Mime. And you had several other minds who've come together, including Bibek Banerjee from the Shiv Nadar University. You've had Mr. Anil Shastribuddhe from AICTE. You've had Dr. Chenraj Roychan from Jain University. And such minds have come together to be able to deliberate and to be able to create an exciting event that is not just deliberating about what has happened, but how to leap forward looking at the new education policy, the national education policy, which is defining. So in many ways, we are at a defining time in India when the national education policy is not just being looked at, but is being implemented. And a vision and a roadmap has been charted out for the national education policy implementation. A roadmap that goes into development of the curriculum, training of the teachers. So you'll have a large fraternity of teachers being trained to be the best in the world. And then the actual rollout of the education programs, so that you have a BA in comedy arts, you have a BA in probably music, and different other aspects that were otherwise not in the formal system will now find their place in the formal education system. While we're waiting for Rajdeep Sardesai, I'm going to step out for a moment and check technically what is possible to get Rajdeep back on. Thank you. Please hold on. While we wait for Rajdeep to join us, the team is working at the back end to get Rajdeep back on. I'm going to request and introduce you to Ashish Kulkarni. Ashish Kulkarni has been one of the prime drivers of the AVGC. He's worked closely on the national education policy, trying to influence it through discussions, helping sort out some of the issues that we as an industry had over looking at getting reflected into national education policy. And in many ways, Ashish has been somebody who's tried to look at it from a perspective of the student, the teacher, the university, and also what can the government do to be able to make this formal. Ashish, we'd like to hear more from you. We've got this slot literally created just for us to be able to hear you and understand what your thoughts and what you would like to say about how you see the industry welcoming the national education policy.
I foresee that the national education policy is going to be a game changer for the media and entertainment events, sports, and the design verticals, because we have a multidisciplinary framework coming right now, and also a very interesting structure where students can come in and go out of the system, but their credits and their opportunities to come back and join the education would be intact. The thing is that if a student is doing first 2 semesters in the university, they get a certificate, and if they complete the other 2 semesters in the second year, they get a diploma, and then additional 4 semesters they get a degree. But if a student having done a foundation program of say filmmaking or animation or events can go back, work for a few years, collect money for the further education, and come back and do the rest, because the students' credits would be in the education bank, and that's what the policy says. It actually makes a lot of important uh, uh, opportunities for multiple universities to work. If a student, say, suppose is studying in, say, Amravati University, those credits can be transferred if his father or so gets transferred to another city. Those credits can be transferred to the other university. So it's called a lateral entry. And I think the system has eased out a lot of things so that even the engineering students who want to learn maybe event management or animation or uh, for that matter music or dance, they can continue engineering with these subjects in addition. Uh, and they would have a set credit for a major and a minor. So I think the liberal arts structure has been brought in at the university level. At the same time, in the school level, from the sixth standard, you will have an optional subjects, and that's where we can actually have creative arts, performing arts, design thinking, or sports taken into the schools, and that will live an opportunity. Raj, so Rajdeep has come. I think you can start with Rajdeep. Right?
Yes. Thank you, Rajdeep.
Sorry about that.
No problem at all. First, thank you for coming back on. And
Thank you so much.
we've changed the 9 p.m. slot to now 5:48. So thank you very much for accommodating us. Go ahead.
My great pleasure, Sabas. Great pleasure, and thank you for the very generous introduction.
I couldn't miss out mentioning Professor Nandini Sardesai, who's not just shaped our lives, my life, and several others across the years. So I'm sure she would welcome this national education policy more than anybody else.
I want to say, first of all, at the very outset, that what has happened in the last 15 minutes should be actually a test case of why I am the wrong person to be speaking on skill sets for a digital content economy. Because let me be very honest, what happened in the last 15 minutes is I started hearing Sabas, and then suddenly the line got cut, and I didn't know what to do. I kept pressing the Zoom link that I had been given. Eventually, since I'm in the India Today office, one of our engineers has got this organized on his laptop. So I just want to say this, first of all, so therefore this is a learning that every day in the world of technology, there is always disruption. Every day in the world of technology, things can go wrong. Technology is not 100% perfect, and therefore you need skilled people to help you in crisis situations. I had a crisis at the moment. I didn't know how to handle it. I was using my WhatsApp on my mobile, and there you had suddenly someone come in and he set it up for me quite brilliantly, including using a sanitizer on the headphones that I'm using. So to all of you at FICCI Frames, thank you very much for having me here. And I think it is indeed a moment which I think deserves a kind of a moment in time that deserves the kind of exhaustive debate and discussion that I'm sure you've had right through this day. Quite simply because this is the age of disruption. The pandemic has taught us so much, but one of the things I think that they've taught us is that the future is uncertain. And in an uncertain future, you really simply need to keep learning. And I think that's the first skill set that you need in this digital age. The ability to recognize that that you have to be future ready. You have to be, in a sense, a step ahead to handle the disruptions that are inevitable in the world around us. I want to start, though, this address with two stories, two big stories of this week, to reflect on just how much the world of the media has changed. Ladies and gentlemen, I came into Mumbai last night at about 10 in the night, and at midnight, I interviewed Riya Chakraborty for 2 hours. The interview was done in a traditional television format, 3 cameras with a switcher and an editor and the works. In previous times, once I had done the interview, I could have easily sort of rested on it and said, my job is done, let the system take over. In this digital age, I cannot do that. What has happened is that the interview had to be sliced for YouTube so that you could get punchy little bits that could be, it's a 2 hour interview that had to be put on YouTube. I had to do a short intro for Instagram. Uh, a promo had to be also prepared for this, for short videos for Instagram, uh, which are also then carried on Facebook. I was sent at 8 in the morning a Twitter hashtag and told, please promote the interview. Effectively, my work didn't end at 2 in the morning when the interview was over, but actually restarted in a way in the morning, because we are in this multimedia age where an interview cannot simply be telecast on TV, but you need to create the surround sound across multimedia platforms. Uh, the second story of this week was a Congress working committee, which had to decide on Sonia Gandhi's continuance. Again, not only did one have to do a report for TV, not only did one have to anchor the 9 p.m. news, one also had to do what we call a video editorial for our uh, 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 mobile site called Newsmo. We had to prepare a copy for the web. We had to then ensure that relevant excerpts were put out on Twitter, that we had photographs that could be put on Instagram. That evening, I was invited to a show in Marathi for our Marathi YouTube channel that has just been set up called Mumbai Aaj Tak. And I had to also report for Aaj Tak in Hindi. So effectively, in that day, I was multilingual because I was doing the story in English, in Hindi, and Marathi. I was multimedia because I was doing the story for TV, for Facebook, for our digital video site, for Twitter, and of course, writing a copy for the web. The reason I highlight these two stories is because, to my mind, they represent what the age in which we live. Let's be very clear. The best way to describe this age is to use a cricket analogy. AB de Villiers is often called the world's first 360 cricketer, which means he can hit boundaries from third man to fine leg in indescribable positions. Content today is in a similar space to what AB de Villiers is on a cricket field. Content, my friends, in my view, is now completely platform agnostic. You simply do not know in today's day and age where a viewer will consume news. Will he take the news on his mobile phone, on his iPad, on TV, or will he simply read the morning newspaper? I think that, to my mind, once we recognize what that means, that once you are in this content, platform agnostic age of content, you are effectively becoming a content provider and then allowing platforms and technology to take over. To my mind, this is the most dramatic transformation that we've seen in the whole process of communication and information. And just look how quickly it's happened. Let me just take you back to where I started, and I'm sure Sabas will remember the age, the late 1980s. I came back from Oxford and I joined the Times of India. I joined the Times of India because while I wanted to be in journalism, I had very few options. There was no 24/7 TV. There was certainly no internet. There were no computers as well. We in the Times of India, typical of the old lady of Boribandar, were doing all our stories on typewriters. I would type the copy, someone would edit it with a red pen, it would be retyped, it would be then taken to a room where it would be placed, the paper would be placed by hand on the bromide and eventually would come out through the hot press. This is 1989-90. This is an age when the first computers came into the office in the Times of India, there were protests from the Times of India employees. The union went on strike. So in the space of 30 years, which maybe at best 1.5 generation, what you've seen is a dramatic transformation wherein from that age where we were on the typewriter, we're today on the mobile. Let's be honest, the mobile has revolutionized news like never before. I want to give an example again. In 1993, there was an earthquake in Latur in Maharashtra. Latur is about 150 kilometers from Aurangabad. It took us 7 days to tell the story of Latur to the world. I remember going there, and the biggest struggle for us was how do we actually reach a space where there is a telex machine from where we can, maybe through a broken down phone line or a phone line that was barely functioning rather, be able to tell the story of Latur earthquake where an entire village had been flattened to the rest of the world. Now imagine where you were today. Today, every citizen of Latur himself or herself who has a mobile phone in hand is effectively a citizen journalist. He or she, God forbid, if there was an earthquake like calamity, can take the videos, share his story and or her story, and within minutes that story could go viral or those images could go viral. Essentially, therefore, you are in this hyper connected world. Hyper connected world which has shrunk all distances, which has shrunk the notion of time and space, and where everything is now in real time. So I think one of the real skill sets that we have to recognize is to appreciate the fact that everyone out there is a citizen journalist. And once we recognize that, we then have to ask ourselves, how do we amplify the advantages which technology provides us in giving us these real-time advantages? Because the real skill set that is required in the times in which we live is the marriage of technology to content. Let's be very clear today. Technology matters, as I just demonstrated at the start of this address, because I was flailing in the wind and I desperately needed help to understand technology. I don't think anyone who is in the communication business today, if I may use the word business, can survive without a clear understanding of the technology that is needed for you to communicate. I want to give another example. A year and a half ago, I was in what is virtually no man's land in Pakistan. This was an area between Wagah and Atari on either side of the border where there was there seemed at that moment no mobiles that were working. And yet I saw some of my colleagues who were in a bus, and this was because the Gurdwara was being inaugurated, Kartarpur Sahib corridor. They were broadcasting live. And I found that some of them had actually put up an app, a live view app, which allowed them even in that wireless area to actually be able to uplink. Now, can you imagine a day and age where you can uplink from your mobile phone? You know, we used to carry the large OB vans with us with OB engineers and the entire process. Here was an individual. The girl had just put on the selfie mode. She was on live view and she was talking over the pictures. Now, to my mind, because she was au fait with technology, she was able to, in a no man's land where we were struggling with getting basic Wi-Fi, she was able to communicate her story so effectively while I was struggling. Maybe it's about age. Maybe I am in the in what I call the penumbral generation of those who grew up in the newspaper age and then made the transition to TV and are now on the verge of retirement as we enter digital. But for that young 25-year-old, the digital world came naturally. The mobile phone and how to handle it and how to use mojo or mobile journalism came so naturally to her. So I think one of the skill sets that we need to learn is that it's never too late to learn. If I go again to Pakistan, I will make sure that I have that live view app and that I can therefore broadcast live even on the border of the two countries. As I said, the skill set requires a marriage of this technology to content. I'm very clear about this. Whatever your technology, at the end of the day, content remains king or queen. Technology alone will not work unless you are able to provide unique, compelling content. To my mind, in the age in which we live, the challenge and the skill sets that need to be developed is to overcome the real crisis of content. The crisis of content which has been sparked off by flailing business models. The 390 odd TV news and current affairs channels, far too many for a country of our size, has created, to my mind, a situation where quantity has replaced quality, where noise has replaced news, where sensation has replaced sense, and chaos has replaced credibility. The challenge to my mind, therefore, is to be unaffected by this noise, and be able to create strong, compelling content. Storytelling, to my mind, still matters. That story then could be told in 2 minutes, it could be told in 20 minutes, but the story must be powerful enough in a cluttered news environment to stand out. So, in a sense, the skill set that 25 years ago was required to, let's say, write an investigative story for a newspaper still remains, but you also have to be ready to, in a way, ensure that that story can be adapted and embraced for the new age. You know, in a sense, while we are in this age of graphic and video intelligently in a manner that the story is compelling. Effectively, what I think the digital age has taught many of us is that you cannot do storytelling only for your peers. The storytelling has to be for a wider audience. And I think that, in a sense, is a learning. It's like a test cricketer, to use a cricketing analogy, my favorite sport, then eventually adapting to 50 overs cricket, and then finally adapting to T20 cricket. There are three formats that require three different sets of skills, some would say. But the one thing common is, to my mind, the ability to adapt. And adaptation, to my mind, is the critical skill of this digital age. I know a number of journalists, slightly senior, with even grayer hair than me, who look down upon this mobile world, who say, I'm not going to come and break down my 2,000-word article into an accessible 3-minute video. That would be dumbing down. I don't think that's the way to look at it. I think the way to look at it is to respect your audiences more, to recognize that there is an audience which may be watching the news, consuming the news on mobile, and is not going to read your 2,000-word article necessarily on the Times of India edit page. He or she needs perhaps to be guided to understand what exactly is the point you're trying to make. As I said today, everyone is a citizen journalist. Everyone watching this address, in some way or the other, has the power of a mobile phone. And that power of the mobile phone, in a sense, becomes a democratizing, it's a great leveler. It gives every individual the opportunity for he or she to become a storyteller. In my view, in fact, the day is not far when India will have a full-fledged citizen journalist channel like we have in Korea, where every individual has the ability to use the power of technology and harness it to provide content that is relevant. And let me use that word relevant. I think it is increasingly important that whatever content you provide in the digital age has to be relevant. How do I get, for example, people to subscribe? Because eventually the model and the business model here is critical. We are in a stage at the moment where newspaper revenues are sharply declining. Newspaper readership, particularly in English language, has plateaued. Where television, you have more channels fighting for the same advertising pie and cutting it, therefore, in 100 ways, and struggling as a result to keep costs down. And you have digital, where no one has found an effective revenue model as yet. The digital model eventually has to be based on subscription. But how do I ensure that someone will see my content to be so compelling and relevant for me to subscribe to it? So therefore, I give the example of the great Economist, the newspaper, the news magazine Economist. Why is it that even in pandemic times, one of the few platforms that has been able to retain a sustainable business model is the Economist? Because the Economist, to my mind, has over the years created a loyal readership who trusts it, and trust is another important factor, who find that the content is relevant to their lives and believe that in some way or the other they will profit, at least in terms of irrigating their mind, by reading The Economist. So when The Economist moves from being a magazine to a digital site, people are then willing to consume The Economist on digital and pay a subscription for it. Ditto with a paper like the Financial Times. Ditto with a paper like the New York Times. Ditto with a paper like the Washington Post. The problem is, in India, what we did was we allowed a certain dumbing down. And to my mind, the moment you dumb down, then you lose your loyal viewer or reader at some stage, or your digital consumer. The digital consumer, to my mind, will look at a product today if it is relevant and is you have to ensure that he or she gains something that he cannot gain from any of the other thousands and millions of sites in the digital world. I think what the digital world has done is it has reduced costs, and therefore you can have thousands and thousands of digital sites in the economy. And while we talk of the growth of this digital boom, we do not look at just how many of those digital sites, especially in the news space, are actually in any position to make revenues. Those revenues, to my mind, will only come when a skill set is of a level where people will subscribe to what you are offering. And I think that, to my mind, is the challenge of our times. The challenge of our times is to bring content that is relevant, that is accessible, that is high quality, and that is cutting across all platforms. I think the ideal world would be a multimedia world, a multi-regional, multilingual world. I keep saying young journalists today will have to be multilingual. They will have to know 3 or 4 languages, including an Indian language called English, to communicate. Because you are using the same content to address different audiences. When I speak in a few hours from now on Mumbai Tak, I have to reach out to the villager in Latur who's probably listening to it. When I'm speaking on the 9 p.m. news, I have my mother and the English audience to listen to. And if I go on Aaj Tak, I have to make sure that my Hindi is good enough for people to find it intelligible. So I think what the digital world has done is actually equipped us and given us the opportunity to become more than just, to use the old word, hacks. We were seen as stenographers. I don't think stenography works anymore. Now it is your ability to package the news, make it more intelligent, and make it the kind of news which people will find attractive enough to pay for it. Let me say this in conclusion. I believe in this digital world only either you've got to be a philanthropist, you've got to find a philanthropist who's willing to pay you enough for sustaining your non-revenue model, or you've got to have such high quality premium products, The Economist being an example, that people simply can't do without it. The era of stenography, to my mind, is over in content. You will need to provide a little bit extra. And that is that skill set that you need to build to see what is that little extra that will make your product or your packaging irresistible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajdeep. Thank you for an engaging session. Thank you for taking us through your journey. Your journey itself was a learning for all of us, and how you've developed your skills along the way. Today, I know that you've also developed the skill of being able to work on another person's computer and get digitally savvy. Looking forward to catching up with you and looking forward to working with you in the days ahead. Thank you very much. And look forward to the interview tonight.
Thank you, and my great apologies to you for keeping you, for holding you up for about 10-12 minutes. But it again reveals that I am technically very, very weak, and that is something that I am learning day by day. I'll get better.
No.
Next time I'll be on the road. Thank you very much, Abbas, and to the entire team at FICCI. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajdeep.
Thank you.
All of you who are here, thank you for being on. Please stand by for our last session of today. It's a special global session at 8:30 today, Powering the Future, Understanding Global Paradigms. It's being moderated by Dr. Pankaj Chandra, Vice Chancellor of the Ahmedabad University, and it features as panelists Dr. Elizabeth Daly, Dean, School of Cinematic Arts, University of Southern California, Dr. Cynthia Asperger, Head of International Special Projects, Ryerson University, Dr. Sissy Fu, Dean, Faculty of Culture and Community, Emily Carr, University of Art and Design, Ms. Caroline Meeby, Director, Arts Network, British Council, and Professor Alison Honor, Pro Vice Chancellor and Executive Dean, Faculty of Arts, Design and Media, Birmingham City University. We're looking forward to this session. It's unique minds, leading minds from across the world who are coming together to be able to share with us their experience in the education space in our media and entertainment sector. Thank you very much. Look forward to the next session.